In choosing to do any one thing, you are choosing not to do every other thing.
I'd like to welcome Pete Mockaitis to the Productivityist Podcast. Pete, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, thanks, Mike. It's great to be here.
All right, so how to be awesome? Like, how do you, let's just get into it. First off, the podcast. The podcast, I want you to share for those who are not familiar with you. I've been on your show. The origins of your podcast. I know this is kind of a bit of a rote question, but in some cases it's just like, okay, why in the world would you want to do a podcast that's just so that's about that kind of goes down that road? I mean, what was the impetus to do that? Because now, I mean, it's a popular podcast. I mean, you're doing quite well with it. And just give me a bit of the backstory on that, because I always find it fascinating when people who've been doing podcasting for a while got into it, because now it's like the hot button thing that everyone's starting a podcast.
Right. Well, yeah, it's funny. I guess having a show that's about 4 years old makes me like a veteran.
It does. It's amazing. And the thing is that, when people look at it, they're like, oh, I really need to get in this podcasting game. It's fairly new. I'm like, I've been podcasting for like a decade. They're like, really? I'm like, yeah, like it's been a while. Like, it's not new, but it's becoming, again, people are like, oh, it's in the mainstream. It's still not totally in the mainstream. Like, it's becoming more popular, and we're seeing more, when mainstream celebrities are starting podcasts and things like that, then it's striking a chord. But I mean, yeah, 4 years ago, it's still, people were like, oh, what's a podcast, right? And I think now we're in that phase. So what kind of led you down that path? So especially with the subject matter you discuss on the show.
Oh, sure thing. Well, I think that the sequence of events was I was doing a lot of coaching, and from that coaching, I had a client say, hey, this is really useful. I'd love for my whole team to know this stuff. And I said, okay, well, we could probably figure out a training program. And so we collaborated together and built out this training program that's become the Enhanced Thinking and Collaboration program, which I still do today. And it's a lot of fun. And so I in building that program, I used a lot of insights I've picked up from some of my favorite books, because I read all kinds of stuff like you read, and it is just really useful, as well as my strategy consulting background and some of the tools that I share and work on in coaching. And so it all kind of came together in terms of something that would just be useful for, knowledge workers, thinking, collaborating professionals. And it was pretty popular in terms of getting some great results for clients in terms of like real hours saved and ROI delivered. And I thought, okay, well, I got a product now. It's a nice, broadly applicable setup. So how can I get the world to know about it? And I thought, boy, wouldn't it be fun if I could interview these authors and experts who know stuff that I just geek out on, and in the process, build some audience and serve all of them, and hopefully sell some of these training programs. Well, I didn't sell very many of the training programs, but we did hit just about by the time this airs, 10 million downloads. Hooray!
Wow.
And so it's kind of growing and working in unexpected ways financially. But what's even more fun is just, boy, the impact we're making in terms of listeners, just, getting jobs and promotions and resolving tricky sort of soul-sucking, conflicts and issues at their workplace, and making that place you spend a third or more of your life more enjoyable.
So how do you make the podcast a priority? Because you got lots of other things going on. Clearly, when you hit that download spectrum and you've been working on it, and it kind of has evolved to a degree, right, over the 4 years. How do you, because I mean, from my vantage point, we've talked about this, like me having a theme day. So we talked about just before we went on the air that I'm recording 4 interviews today. And today is the day where I focus on listening. So clearly listening to a lot of conversations and listening to, past episodes so I can get them ready for production and all that stuff. How do you make that a priority?
Well, in a way, just the force of accountability that right. There are tens of thousands of people who will notice, they will in fact notice if the show I say that comes out on this regular recurring schedule is not there. So that's a big one. is that, and then it's the scheduling, with regard to Tuesdays and Thursdays in the afternoon is sort of when I am usually open for doing interviews. So those get scheduled way in advance, and I've got some staff, that have got accountability toward in terms of they need sort of clear guidance and direction in terms of sort of, hey, what's urgent, what are we working on, what's the priority, and it's sort of. I would be overcome with guilt if I just said, you know what, not going to do the show for a couple months because I'm not feeling it. I mean, that wouldn't happen. At the very least, I would plan that in advance and have, content flowing and maybe a couple strategic replays of greatest hits. You can call them reruns, but that's been pretty rare. And so, yeah, that's the story, is that I would. But the sheer force of guilt and knowing I'd be disappointing so many people is what keeps me from blowing it off. If I happen to not be in the mood, I find a way to get back in the mood.
Let's shift and talk about prioritization in general, I think, because I think that's what a lot of people focus on time management. They think about, tasks and schedules and all that, but really, when it boils down to it, it's priorities that you have to take advantage, or the priority, if you want to kind of go down that Greg McKeown path of, there's no such thing as more than one priority. I mean, we if you've read, and I know you've read a lot of this stuff, that you understand that. One of the things that I've looked at over the years is this ability to prioritize, and you've got some strategies that you've been able to implement over the years that have helped you with that. Because, I mean, you've got a lot going on. So to be able to not only have that external accountability of not wanting to let people down, which is the same principle that I really apply at this point. Once you've been doing this long enough, you're like, if I don't put an episode out, something's going to, there's some integrity and trust and all that stuff can kind of erode. What are some of the tactics that you put in place to kind of make sure that prioritization is, well, for lack of a better term, a priority?
Oh, sure. Well, boy, I think prioritization is so critical. I mean, and I think especially for me. So if you've ever taken the Strengths Finder, my top strengths are ideation and activator, which in a way is a really cool combo in terms of I get all these ideas and then I run after them. And so that's cool in terms of it's unique, it's interesting, it's fun, it's varied, it's dynamic, it's new, and all kinds of things are getting birthed into the world. It's not so ideal because many of the ideas I have are not worth pursuing.
Right.
And so it really does take a reality check to watch that. And I think that's true of many domains of life. Many of the emails you get are not worth, answering or replying to or taking action on. Many of your ideas don't need to be done. Maybe even the tasks or initiatives that your boss or, teammates or colleagues are asking of you ought not to be done or ought not to be done today or right away. So I am huge on prioritization, and there's a few tools that I've picked up in my life and working with my guests, and so I could just go right into them if you like.
Well, let's talk about the one that let's create a bit of a diversity here and a bit of a variable. Let's talk about the one tool that you uncovered or came across through either your own research or through the guests that you've had on your show that you didn't expect that would work as well as it has.
Oh, thank you. I like that. I'm going to go with episode 80, Jay Papasan, who co-wrote the book of The One Thing. He has a question that's just so powerful, and I probably ask it every day. And that is, what's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? And it's so powerful because we get tons of ideas, or I do, and then it's like, oh, but in fact, there's only one thing, that will make all those other things easier or unnecessary. I'm going to do that. And then there's all kinds of nice little ways that you can point that with laser precision, maybe on a particular domain of activity. And then within that, you could ask it multiple layers to dig in and find some game changers. So here's an example. I asked that one thing question with regard to my physical health. I was getting a little bit of a weight gain dad bod going on with the two new kiddos.
Yep, been there.
and so I said, all right, so what's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else be easier or unnecessary in the realm of, fitness, health, and weight management. And I thought, well, it'd be great if I ate more vegetables. Well, hey, what's the one thing I could do that would make that easier? It's like, well, if I could prep a bunch of salad in advance. And it's like, well, what's the one thing that would make that easier? It's like, you know what? It would be finding the perfect salad container for my fridge such that, I don't have to, pull out all the vegetables, make a salad, put all the vegetables back, every time. And so I can rather leverage my time by making one bundle of salad for the week and then just sort of, top it with cheese or croutons or whatever at the moment of the meal. And that away, I am just sort of ready. It's like, oh, hey, there's a salad. It's just going to take you less than 1 minute to get that salad put together because it's all pre-made in this bin. So the time I actually spent researching on Amazon and measuring, my fridge and seeing what would just be the perfect container has repaid itself many, many times over in terms of time saved and more vegetables eaten. And I have, in fact, dropped 10 pounds. So success story.
How did you break the bias surrounding that advice? Because, and when I look at some of the other ones that are out there regarding, prioritization, people have in their head that, oh, well, no, there's not just one thing. What are you talking about? Like, I can't just focus on that. There's so many things going on. Like there's these, and I've talked about the app Pocket Biases before. And I'll link to it in the show notes, as well as all the other links that are relevant, as I usually do when it comes to this podcast. But the biases surrounding that, because we're human, right? So there's this element of you must, from time to time, maybe not as much now because you've got resolve around it, looking at that question, the one thing, and how do you break the biases that can show up that will prevent you from giving yourself a credible or even substantial answer to that question?
Well, that's intriguing. So I guess there's one point of resistance is there can't just be one thing. There must be many things.
Right.
And I think for that, I can appease myself.
Or just a sidebar really quickly. Or it's you get caught up in the one thing that's not for you. It's for somebody else. Well, I can't just do this for me. There's other people, right? So there's all these little things that poke holes in that. So I just want to throw that in there because there's a few of them, right?
Well, I think that in a way, you're pointing to something excellent, which is that with the one thing, that sounds, it's even capitalized. Capital O, capital T is like, whoa, this is big, this is momentous, this is ominous, it's sort of irrevocable. And I would say to that, really, it's pretty flexible in terms of I can come to the conclusion that it's this salad container, and then I might discover that I was mistaken. And sometimes I hate salad. I don't know, maybe, and I don't actually use it at all, and I don't eat the salad. And I could say, whoops, if I quote failed or made a mistake there, it's not super problematic. I could just say, okay, well, I was mistaken there, but hopefully I've learned a couple of things about me and how I operate. And if salad isn't the pathway, maybe it's fruit, maybe it's LaCroix or carbonated.
Yep.
Water beverages, that are filling without calories, whatever. We can sort of reduce some of the pressure associated with I've got to nail it perfectly the first time forever. But rather it's like, nope, this is my leading hypothesis. I'm going to run with it and see how it goes.
Meal planning is important because it prevents us from being a disappointed wreck when dinner time comes around and we have no clue what to make, or even if we have the ingredients to make the meal. It's a time and a money saver, but most importantly, it frees up valuable brain space. Creating a meal plan prepares us for the week to come and gives us peace of mind that we're organized and can feed ourselves and our family. That's why I do it, and that's why Plan to Eat helps me do it. Your subscription includes access to the Plan to Eat website and fully featured mobile apps on iOS and Android. And Plan to Eat gives you the tools to clip and organize recipes from any website, the ones your family loves and that fit your dietary preferences and needs. And you can create a meal plan around your schedule. Then what happens is the Plan to Eat software automatically creates an organized shopping list based on your plan. So sign up for your free trial at plantoeat.com/timecrafting. That's plantoeat.com/timecrafting. The coupon will be automatically applied to your account and can be used when you're ready to subscribe. It's valid for new customers only. Give Plan to Eat a try today.
All right, we're going to take a break from this lively conversation, but when we come back, I'm going to ask Pete about the importance of letting go of things, as well as why people are kind of drawn to certain words and the expectations that come along with those terms, and a whole lot more. But first, I want to share with you some messages from this episode's sponsors, because sponsors help keep this podcast going and going strong. When running a business, HR issues can kill you. Wrongful termination suits, minimum wage requirements, labor regulations, and HR manager salaries aren't cheap, an average of $70,000 a year. Bambee, spelled B-A-M-B-E-E, was created specifically for small business. You can get a dedicated HR manager, craft HR policy, and maintain your compliance, all for just $99 a month. With Bambee, you can change HR from your biggest liability to your biggest strength. Your dedicated HR manager is available by phone, email, or real-time chat. And from onboarding to terminations, they customize your policies to fit your business and help you manage your employees day to day, all for just $99 a month. Month to month, no hidden fees, you can cancel at any time. You didn't start your business because you wanted to spend time on HR compliance. Let Bambee help. Get your free HR audit today. All you need to do is to go to Bambee.com/timecrafting right now to schedule your free HR audit. That's Bambee.com/timecrafting, spelled BAM to the BEE.com/timecrafting. Go to Bambee.com/timecrafting and get that free HR audit today. If you're looking to gain the edge in your career or help you launch a new business, the UCI Division of Continuing Education can help. The UCI Division of Continuing Education has courses and certifications in a wide range of categories, from business and leadership to IT, project management, law, human resources, and over 60 convenient certificates and specialized studies programs on campus and online designed for the working professional. Online courses are taught by expert instructors with industry experience, and they offer flexibility and a real immersive online classroom experience where you can even collaborate with your peers. Online courses allow busy working adults to take classes at their own time, and you don't have to drive to campus either. Established in 1962, the UCI Division of Continuing Education has been offering education for adult learners in Orange County for over half a century, and they are ranked among the top 50 universities nationally and ranked 10th among all public universities, according to a U.S. News and World Report annual college survey. They maintain over 30,000 enrollments from students worldwide each year and offer hundreds of exciting courses and programs to local, regional, and global constituencies. There are certificate programs and specialized studies programs available. Certificate programs offer an in-depth body of knowledge to ensure you gain mastery of a particular topic. Specialized studies feature shorter, more concentrated curricula for those short on time. Both are distinctive achievements that can help prepare you for career advancement or transition. You can advance your career in as little as 6 months. Spring registration is now open, so visit ce.uci.edu/productivityist and enter the promo code TIMECRAFTING for 15% off of one course. That's ce.uci.edu/productivityist and enter the promo code TIMECRAFTING to get that 15% off of one course. Now, that discount is for almost all of the certificate programs. The exceptions only include coding boot camps, international programs, teacher credentialing programs, and test prep courses. And this offer is only valid until July 31st, 2020 at 11:59 p.m. So visit ce.uci.edu/productivityist and enter the promo code TIMECRAFTING to get your 15% discount off of one course today. Now it's time for my Productivityist podcast pick of the week, and this one's a bit of a distraction or diversion from the day-to-day that's going on at any time of year, really. Just something that you can kind of listen to escape for a little bit. In fact, you can escape to an imaginary world with this podcast because it's called Imaginary Worlds. It's hosted by Eric Malinsky, and Andy Malinsky's been on this program before, and he recommended it to me eons ago. And it's really cool. It's a bi-weekly podcast about science fiction and other fantasy genres. Host Eric Malinsky has novelists as guests, screenwriters, comic book artists, filmmakers, and game designers about their craft of creating fictional worlds. I think anytime that you can listen to something that might be outside of the normal business or even productivity related podcasts, and that's why I like to make these kind of recommendations, it's useful, it's helpful, and it just offers a bit of an escape from the day-to-day. So I recommend that you listen to the Imaginary Worlds podcast. There's some really great ones that I really enjoyed. One was called In Defense of the Star Wars Holiday Special, and I remember watching that. Another is called Making the Good Places Better, and it was about The Good Place, which is one of my favorite sitcoms, TV programs of all time. They even have one called Superheroes in the Ring, which is about Mexican wrestling, and if you've been following me for a while, you know I'm a fan of pro wrestling. So I would recommend that you check out Imaginary Worlds. It's the Productivityist podcast pick of the week. And now let's get back to my conversation with Pete Mockaitis here on the Productivityist podcast. All right, let's dig into some of the other ones that you do. So let's talk about one of the strategies you take on to prioritize that. Let's go the other direction that you've tried. So let's maybe not one of the ones that's worked that you've tried or that you've heard that didn't work as well for you as you had hoped.
Okay, let's see. Well, I've tried a lot of things, and I'm thinking about.
And it's okay if it's theming your time or mode-based work or any of the stuff related to time crafting. I'm fine with that.
Well, I would say I don't think that this doesn't work, but I think that it doesn't work as well as I imagined it to.
Right.
And that is, some of the David Allen Getting Things Done methodologies. I've had him on the show a couple times. I think he's awesome. Yes. I think the methodology is awesome. And if you're familiar with the system, I am a champ. Hey, so we talked about ideation. I'm a champ at collecting ideas in terms of I will pop open my OmniFocus and just get all kinds of ideas put in there. I am not so much a champ at doing the processing and organizing, etc. Because what I find is that what is urgent and important is so clearly top of mind that I don't really need to reference that so often. I might have 800 items in my OmniFocus inbox right now, which is shameful. But it's very useful in the sense that I can recall, oh wait, I had an idea about this thing. Where is it? Oh, there it is. And so I get to sort of search and find it, as opposed to perfectly systematically putting everyone into projects and then with tagging them with contexts and doing all of those things. And so I do take some time to process and organize those here and there. But I am far from on the train of doing a weekly review. And so that's my scoop. That the GTD system, it has enriched my life. I am a champ at collecting, and that has been helpful. I have not quite been so much a champ of the processing and organizing to achieve the perfect mind like water as sort of a state.
All right, let's talk about the effectiveness ratio. By the way, I'm the same one with GTD. I mean, I've got a video. I'll link to it. Actually, I have a series of posts like why I stopped doing GTD, and I love David. I've had David on the show before. I'll link to his episodes as well. But yeah, it's I think there can be some struggles for some people with it. The review is one of those things for sure that I hear a lot, and I'm sure you do as well. Let's talk about the effectiveness ratio, the outcome constraint ratio, because I think that that's something that it hasn't been touched on very much on this program, and it's something that people can get really curious about. So can you go into that a bit and how that's helped you with prioritization, especially taking prioritization to a whole new level?
Oh, sure thing. And I think in a way part of this is why the processing and organizing of all my ideas isn't as necessary, because just a few of my ideas are many, many, many times, more valuable than the others. And so I run after them, and it's okay if some of the others are left to the wayside for a little while. And so the outcome to constraint ratio or effectiveness ratio, that's what I call it. And just because it's so flexible in terms of what could go into this. So I guess I'm thinking about the book Good to Great, in which Jim Collins talks about how for different businesses, when they find their appropriate ratios, it makes all the difference in terms of how they can manage and incentivize and prioritize, their efforts, based upon those ratios. But I think it matters for all sorts of life endeavors as well. So in business, I think that's easy. So you on your numerator, you put what is it, the outcome that you're interested in. And in business, it's often profit. I would like to earn profit. And then on the denominator, we put the thing that is the constraint, that which you seem to have some trouble, and there's never enough of it, And if you had more of it, you could do so much more. And in this instance, it would be time. So I take a look at the profit per hour associated with different initiatives. And so I will literally have a spreadsheet in which I've got all these ideas, and I think, is that worth doing? And so then I put things down there, and I'd say, hot dog, wouldn't you know it? This initiative appears to be worth maybe $2,000 an hour, versus this initiative is worth about $100 an hour. Well, heck, I'm going to start with a $2,000 an hour initiative for now, and then maybe if we have time, I might get around to sort of the lesser value stuff. And so this kind of connects to another tool, the 80-20 principle. And what I think is kind of misapplied about that is it's not just about like, you should prioritize because some things are a little bit more important than others. Well, the 80-20 principle, if you want to dig into the math, actually implies that certain things, those 20% vital few things, are in fact 16 times as important as the trivial many less important things. And that has been my own experience. As I take a look at business initiatives or other things, the critical stuff isn't just a smidge more important, but it has 16 times the impact as the other stuff.
How important do you think it is to let go of certain things? You talked about like the relentless capture of ideas and collection of ideas. And with prioritization, in my experience, that you have to be comfortable or get comfortable with letting go of things, whether it's letting go of them permanently or pushing them off to the wayside for an extended or even temporary period of time, whatever. How important do you think that is, and how have you been able to get better at that? Because in order to be able to prioritize, you have to be able to get better at that.
That's absolutely true, and I'd say it's fundamentally essential in terms of you got a finite number of hours in the day, and we all are subject to this constraint, and you can't do it all, and then you have to become at some level of peace with that which you're not doing. And what I find super helpful is just when you think about opportunity cost, that implication is in choosing to do any one thing, you are choosing not to do every other thing. That's just sort of what's going on there. And so I think it's very helpful if you think about, what you're saying no to and how there could be a sort of a sense of loss or pain or like, oh man, I don't know, I'm kind of missing out. But just think about what is the corresponding yes that you are saying, adopting there. So for example, I think there are so many interesting business ideas I might run with and play with and pursue, spending some time there. But as I imagine, hey, is it worth, my children seeing me almost never? Because that's really what's at stake. I mean, if you get very honest with yourself, it's like, okay, to pursue all these cool, interesting things, what's the true cost? That's the true cost. Are you okay with that? And maybe you are, and in which case it's like game on, but I think often you'll see that you're not. And if you've ever experienced some regret in terms of you've overcommitted yourself, you're exhausted, you're stressed, you're burnt out, you want to just be sleeping and not working or fulfilling all of these commitments that you've made, or you are hurting people because you've overcommitted and you are now putting them in a tight spot because you can't actually deliver on those commitments. I think just having lived through that a few times, it's really makes it easier to decline an obligation up front, whether that's to my own self in my mind or to a third party who's making a request of me.
So one of the things as we get close to wrapping up that I want to touch on is when we were talking about putting together this episode, you sent me an email and you said, hey, what if we talked about extreme prioritization? And one of the things that, as I was reflecting on it and reviewing it, that term extreme, sometimes I get a little bit of, I wouldn't say my back up about it. That's not the right way to put it. But I get, it throws me off. It's like, the term extreme, even, and I mean, we've heard the term 10X and all that stuff. The stuff that, and I get it, there are people that really push for that stuff. I didn't want to, we're not titling it extreme prioritization, by the way. Anyone who's listening to this is like, well, no, you're not going to, no, it's not extreme. What do you why do you think, I'm not saying that you think this way, but why do you think that the terms, when we hear those terms, especially when with relationship to like how to be awesome at your job, the terms of extreme, hustle, 10x, like all of the kind of buzzy words that can show up, which again I think have value and merit in some respects. Why do you think that why do you think people are drawn to them? And then how do you kind of temper expectations around that? Because I mean, results can vary, right?
Yes. Well, I'm thinking about the book Breakthrough Advertising by Gene Schwartz, which is like a legendary required reading for people in the copywriting space. And so he talks about how with regard to promotion, in a way, that's what's happening when you're titling a podcast.
Sure.
Episode.
I mean,
like
I get it. I mean, people are not going to be so naive. Like, I mean, let's face it. Let's be honest. I mean, how to be awesome at your job is going to get some really good, really good results when people are looking for it, which I think is great. And same thing with extreme, like all that stuff is it definitely lends itself well to that kind of thing for sure.
Certainly. So I think he sort of explains that, based upon, where a market is in its maturity, there's one point where the move is to just talk about, hey, this has more of what you want. This has more RAM, more hard drive space, more gigahertz in a computer, for example. It's like, ooh, that's what I want, is I want more. And so likewise, if you're at a place where, hey, I've tried, my computer's not fast enough. Ooh, well, this one has more, therefore it's good. Or I've tried prioritizing, it didn't get me the results I want. Ooh, well, this one's extreme. So in a way, I think that's why there is some appeal. And I guess what I was trying to convey more so was just from a matter of clarity, like, is it Warren Buffett or someone said that the difference between successful people and super successful people is that super successful people say no to almost everything.
I think it's Buffett in some respects. I think you're paraphrasing, but yeah, I mean, there's that story about the pilot tale and all that stuff, which I'll link to. I'll find that for people to read in the show notes.
And I think there's really some truth to that in terms of, you've got a zone of genius. There are certain things that are going to be dramatically more helpful and effective for you than others, maybe 16 times. And thusly, it can seem extreme in terms of, I think about some documentary I saw about a plant-based diet. They were discussing the word extreme. And someone said, boy, that's a pretty extreme position, don't you think, that only having a plant-based diet? And then their counterpoint was, well, I think what's extreme is all the problems we have with, high blood pressure and cholesterol and all these other things. I was like, oh, counterpoint, my meat-eating tendencies are being challenged. And so I think that's just sort of thought-provoking on what do you consider extreme and why. And some people who do CrossFit, we'd say, oh my gosh, that's kind of extreme. But they would say, people who are if we're sitting for 8+ hours a day and not, engaging our body in things, that's extreme. So I guess you got my thoughts just sort of running wild in terms of how do you define extreme? What is the connotation of that? But all I'm really after is I think Ramit Sethi talks about it.
It's to draw attention. It's to like make people go, whoa, hold on. Like I think words, I mean, I'm a bit of a word nerd, right? So like that's one of the reasons why I go down this rabbit hole a little bit, because I think it's those words that they can be very polarizing to some people. In some cases they aren't. But I mean, for me, it's like the word, okay, I'll give you a great example. Productivityist, which is a total made up portmanteau, which is someone called me that once, and then I kind of adopted it, and I thought it was kind of cool. When someone from Poland emailed me and said, "I love your content," I was a little hesitant because the word productivity is in our country is still, there's still some association to when we were one of the countries that was in the Eastern Bloc, and it was associated with, if you weren't productive enough, then you didn't get what we need. There was a real negative connotation attached to it, right? And I never thought of it from that perspective, right? Because productivity, and even in Canada, versus the United States, productivity is positioned differently. Like there's, most of the people that listen to this podcast and follow my work are not Canadian. I mean, not just because of a population base, but because the idea of productivity isn't as, in my experience, and having done this for a decade, I think I can speak from a position of authority on it, is they're not as they're not as driven by it in as much as in the United States. I'm seeing more people that are driven by the idea of, I want to be more productive. In Canada, again, through what I've seen and maybe it's the audience that I speak to, I don't know, but there's the definition of productivity isn't so much personal and maybe self-development or personal development. It's more driven by like, how much stuff are you making, right? Like the gross domestic, like that kind of thing. So words, depending on what perspective you're looking at from them, can have very different reactions. And I think that's what you're getting at here too.
They certainly do. And that is fascinating how, different, nations or ethnicities or even sort of subgroups who are into things resonate with words differently. And I think, as I think about extreme, here's what I'd say is the virtue of extreme, is I guess I'm thinking about things that are bifurcated in terms of, like, let's just say that there are 100 things on your to-do list, and then you spend the vast majority of your time on 4 of those things, and then just a smidgen of time or almost none on the rest. Now, if I were to look at that in a graphical way, like bar charts or whatever, I'd say that looks kind of extreme. It's like those things are really tall there and then really short almost everywhere else. And I'd say that is often the optimal way to live in terms of identifying what really, really matters and then going with those with gusto, and then doing very little on the others. And I think Ramit Sethi of I Will Teach You to Be Rich, he was actually part of the inspiration for the title, How to Be Awesome at Your Job. Let's just make this extremely clear and direct. This is what this is about, how to be awesome at your job, or I Will Teach You to Be Rich. He talks about how he recommends that people spend lavishly on the things that are really important to them and matter and bring them happiness, and to cut ruthlessly or mercilessly on the expenses that don't. And I think that applies well for personal finance, as well as how we're allocating our other resources of life to stuff that matters versus does not.
Now we've gone down into this one area where people are like, I want to hear more. I'm like, sorry, we're wrapping things up. Pete, this has been great. And, I think that there's more to be unveiled at some point. And I'd love to have you back on the show in the future to just dig into this a bit more, because even the word awesome to some people can have some different meanings and different connotations. I mean, that's the beauty part about the English language, I think, to a degree as well. But
yeah, some find it unprofessional. I've heard that before. And I'm okay with that. Yeah, we're rebels over here. We're rogues.
Well, this has been great, Pete. Where can people keep up with you and your work and make sure that they subscribe? I mean, I've talked about your podcast before, and I think it's a great one. Obviously, I'm going to link to that in the show notes so people can subscribe. But where else can people keep up with you and your work?
Oh, thanks for asking. Well, I'd say awesomeatyourjob.com is where everything lives. And that's the scoop. I'd recommend if you do end up listening to the show, check out some of the very first episodes between episodes 0 and 1. They're labeled A, B, C, D, E, and F. And those are some of the listener favorites from different domains of awesomeness, and a good way to kind of get oriented and enjoy some of our best stuff right away.
Pete, thanks for joining me today on the Productivityist podcast.
Well, thanks, Mike.